High Counselor Veltar stood before the ancient crystal formation that had remained dormant for 3,000 years. His blue-skinned hands shook as he placed them on the glowing surface. Around him, the 6 other council members of different alien races watched with desperate hope in their eyes. "Are you certain this will work?" asked Counselor Harina, her insect-like features twitching with worry. "The old texts speak of heroes, but they are so old that many believe them to be myths." Veltar's large black eyes reflected the pulsing light of the summoning crystal. "We have no choice. The Vorthan Empire has destroyed 40 worlds. They will reach our core systems within 2 cycles. If the ancient magic can bring us champions from across the galaxy, we must try." The Zephyrian homeworld had never known war. For millions of years, the 7 races of their alliance had lived in peace, sharing knowledge and resources. Their greatest conflicts had been debates over art and philosophy. They had no armies, no weapons, no concept of military strategy. When the Vorthans came with their warships and demands for surrender, the peaceful worlds could only watch in horror as their neighbors fell, one by one. Veltar began the ritual chant in the old language. The crystal responded, growing brighter with each word. Energy crackled around the chamber as the other counselors added their voices. They called out, "To the galaxy," begging for heroes to save them from destruction. The magic reached across space, searching for champions. It found a small blue world in a distant spiral arm, a planet the locals called Earth. The spell was supposed to select individual warriors, knights and mages who could lead their people to victory. But something went wrong. Instead of finding a few chosen heroes, the magic grabbed something much larger. Admiral Jake Morrison was reviewing battle plans in his ready, a room aboard the Un's Liberty when the universe twisted around him. One moment he was studying star charts of the Proxima Centauri system. The next he was floating in space that looked completely wrong. Strange constellations filled the view screen. His ship's computers were screaming warnings about impossible sensor readings. "Admiral, to the bridge," came the urgent voice of his communications officer. "Sir, you need to see this." Morrison ran to the bridge, his mind racing. Round the Liberty, 12 destroyers and 3 carriers maintained formation, but they were no longer in human space. The stars were alien patterns, and directly ahead hung a massive space station that looked like it was grown rather than built. "Report," Morrison ordered as he took his command chair. "Sir, we appear to have been transported through some kind of dimensional rift," said Commander Rick Hayes, his intelligence officer. "Long-range sensors show we're in orbit around an inhabited world. The planet is broadcasting on multiple frequencies, but we can't understand the languages." Captain Lisa Brooks of the destroyer Un's Ranger appeared on the main screen. "Admiral, I'm picking up what looks like distress signals from the planet's surface. Whatever brought us here, the locals seem to be in trouble." Morrison studied the readings. 50,000 human military personnel, their most advanced warships, and enough firepower to level a continent had just appeared in alien space. If this was some kind of trap, it was the strangest one he had ever seen. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Ben Parker from the sensor station, "I'm detecting massive energy readings from the planet's surface. It looks like some kind of magical energy." "Signature?" Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Magic, Lieutenant?" "I know how it sounds, sir, but our instruments are reading energy patterns that don't match any known physics. It's almost like the fairy tales about wizards and spells." Before Morrison could respond, the communications array came alive with an incoming transmission. The universal translator worked overtime to make sense of the alien language. "Unknown. Vessels, please respond. We are the Zephyrian Council. We have summoned you to aid us in our darkest hour. Great heroes, we beg for your help." Morrison looked around his bridge crew. They were soldiers, not heroes from legend. They carried guns instead of swords, flew spaceships instead of riding dragons. But the desperation in the alien voice was clear. "Open a channel," Morrison ordered. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the United Nations Space Fleet. We received your transmission. What kind of help do you need?" The response came quickly, filled with relief and confusion. "Admiral Morrison, we called for champions to save us from the Vorthan Empire. But our sensors show you have brought an entire fleet. Are you the heroes from the ancient prophecies? Morrison exchanged glances with Hayes. Prophecies and magic were not part of their military training, but 50,000 lives depended on his decisions. We're not sure what prophecies you're talking about, but we're here now. What's this Vorthan Empire doing to your people? What followed was a story that made Morrison's blood run cold. An aggressive alien empire was sweeping across this part of the galaxy, enslaving or destroying every world in their path. The peaceful races had no way to fight back. They had tried diplomacy, offered tribute, even attempted to hide their worlds. Nothing worked. They give each world the same choice, the alien voice explained. Submit to slavery or face complete destruction. We have seen the fate of those who resist. The Vorthans leave nothing alive. Morrison stood up from his command chair. In his 40 years of military service, he had faced pirates, terrorists, and enemy fleets. But he had never encountered an empire built on pure conquest and genocide. How long before they reach your worlds? He asked. Our scouts report their main fleet will arrive in 5 of your days. We have perhaps 50,000 civilians on each of our 7 worlds. We called for heroes because we hoped someone could teach us to fight, but we fear it may be too late to learn. Morrison looked out at his fleet. These ships and crews had been heading to establish humanity's first colony beyond the solar system. Instead, they had been pulled into someone else's war against an enemy. That sounded like something from humanity's darkest history, but Morrison had read those history books. He knew what happened when peaceful people faced organized brutality without anyone to protect them. The results were always the same. Council. Members, this is Admiral Morrison. You may not be the heroes you expected, but we're what you've got. Prepare to receive our diplomatic team. You need to understand your situation better. As he gave orders to prepare for first contact, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that these aliens had no idea what they had actually summoned. They wanted heroes from legend, champions of light and justice. Instead, they had pulled predators from a death world into their galaxy. Captain Lisa Brooks stepped off the shuttle onto the surface of Zephr Prime, the capital world of the Alien Alliance. The gravity felt strange under her boots, almost like walking on the moon. Everything around her seemed too light, too delicate, as if the entire world was made of glass that might break at any moment. The Zephrian escort, a tall blue-skinned being named Colin, watched her every move with wide eyes. Please, Captain Brooks, walk slowly. The ground here is not made for heavy footsteps. Brooks looked down at her standard military boots, then at the alien's bare feet that seemed to barely touch the crystal walkways. She was trying to walk normally, but apparently even that was too much for their delicate world. I'm walking as gently as I can, she said, though she noticed small cracks appearing in the crystal path beneath her feet. How do you people exercise on this world? Colin tilted his head in confusion. Exercise? What is this word? Dr. Amy Chen, the fleet's xenobiologist, pulled out her tablet and showed him a video of humans running. The alien's face went pale. As he watched people moving at what humans considered a light jog, "This is what your people do for fun?" Colin asked, his voice filled with horror. "They run so fast they could hurt themselves. And why do they sweat? Are they sick?" Chen exchanged a look with Brooks. They were beginning to understand just how different these aliens were from humans. "We sweat to cool our bodies when we work hard. It's normal for us. Your bodies create their own cooling system." Colin stopped walking entirely. What kind of world did you come from that required such dangerous adaptations? Commander Rick Hayes was having similar conversations in the council chambers. High Counselor Veltar had gathered representatives from all 7 allied races to meet with the human intelligence officer. Age, species. Looked more delicate than the last. "Tell us about your world," asked Counselor Harina, her insect-like features twitching with curiosity. "What is Earth like?" Hayes pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's countenance. "Well, it's mostly water. The land masses have different climates. Some parts are hot deserts, others are frozen ice caps. We have mountains, forests, and plains." The aliens leaned forward, studying the images. And all of these areas are inhabited by your people? Asked Veltar. Yes, humans live everywhere on Earth. We adapt to different environments, even the frozen areas, asked a reptilian counselor named Shenka. How do you survive in temperatures that would kill most living things? Hayes smiled. We make clothes, build heated shelters, and eat high-energy foods. Some humans actually enjoy cold weather sports like skiing and ice climbing. Ice. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Veltar spoke. Your people climb frozen mountains for entertainment? Some do. Others prefer warmer activities like swimming in the ocean or hiking through jungles. Swimming in vast bodies of water filled with dangerous creatures. Hayes paused, realizing how alien-human recreational activities must sound to these beings. Well, yes. Though most of our oceans are safe for swimming. Most Harina's voice cracked. You mean some of your waters are not safe? You have sharks, jellyfish, and other marine life that can be dangerous? But humans have been swimming in oceans for thousands of years. We know how to be careful. The aliens looked at each other with expressions of pure terror. Hayes was beginning to understand that these beings had never faced any real danger in their entire evolutionary history. Meanwhile, Colonel Sam Turner was attempting to train a group of Zephyrian volunteers in basic self-defense. What he considered the gentlest possible introduction to combat was sending his alien students to the medical bay. I barely touched him, Turner explained to Dr. Chen as she examined a Zephyrian who had fainted during a demonstration of blocking techniques. I just showed them how to raise their arms to protect their face. Their bone density is about 1/3 of human normal, Chen replied, running her medical scanner over the unconscious alien. What feels like a light tap to us is like being hit with a hammer to them. Turner looked at the dozen Zephyrians who had volunteered for combat training. They were all staring at him like he was some kind of monster. How am I supposed to teach them to fight if they can't even handle basic movements? Maybe fighting isn't something they can learn, suggested Dr. Chen. These species never developed predators or prey relationships. They've never had to compete for resources or defend themselves from anything. Back in the council chambers, Hayes was learning more about the galactic situation. The Vorthan Empire had been expanding for 50 years, but their military tactics were surprisingly simple. They arrive in a system with overwhelming numbers, explained Veltar. Their ships surround the planet and demand surrender. If a world refuses, they destroy it completely. What about planetary defenses? Hayes asked. Weapons platforms, fighter squadrons, ground-based missiles? The aliens looked confused. We have some old defense satellites that were built for protection against asteroids, said Counselor Shenka. But they are not designed for fighting other ships. What about your ground forces? Armies, marines, military bases? We have police forces to help with accidents and emergencies, Veltar said slowly. But we have no armies. Why would we need them? Hayes stared at the alien leaders. You've never had wars between your different species? Wars? Serena Santani twitched. You mean organized fighting between groups? Why would different species fight each other? Resources, territory, political differences, religious beliefs, economic competition? But there are enough resources for everyone, Veltar interrupted. And territory is vast. Why fight when you can simply move to another world? Hayes realized these aliens had never experienced scarcity, competition, or conflict. Their worlds were paradise gardens where everything was abundant and peaceful. They had no concept of zero-sum games or survival of the fittest. Commander Hayes, said Veltar, we are beginning to understand that your people come from a very different type of world. Tell us truthfully, what kind of place created beings like you? Hayes looked around the council chamber at the beautiful crystalline architecture, the perfect climate, and the gentle faces of beings who had never known fear or hardship. Then he thought about Earth, with its natural disasters, predators, diseases, and constant struggle for survival. We call it a death world, he said quietly. A planet where almost everything is trying to kill you, so you either learn to fight back or you die. The aliens stared at him in horror, finally beginning to understand what they had summoned to their galaxy. The Vorthan Empire's war fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyr system like a dark cloud blocking out the stars. Supreme Commander Krexel stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, watching his sensors count. The enemy forces, Port Krexel ordered his tactical officer. His voice carried the authority of someone who had conquered 40 star systems without ever facing real resistance. The usual setup, Supreme Commander, one inhabited world, some civilian traffic, and a few old defense satellites. No military fleet detected. It should be another easy conquest. Krexel nodded, satisfied. The pattern was always the same. These soft civilizations built pretty cities and made art, but they never learned to fight. When his ships arrived, they either surrendered immediately or tried to negotiate. Both responses led to the same result. Any response to our arrival? He asked. The planetary government is broadcasting surrender offers and requests for mercy. Standard weak behavior, sir. Lieutenant Ben Parker was monitoring long-range sensors aboard the human destroyer UN's Falcon when the Vorthan fleet appeared. His hands moved quickly over his controls as he counted the enemy ships. Captain, we have incoming hostiles. Count is over 200 vessels, various sizes. They're moving in a standard wall formation toward the inner system. Captain Troy Adams studied the tactical display. The Vorthan ships were arranged in neat rows like they were on parade instead of preparing for battle. Any attempt at screening forces or advanced scouts? No, sir. They're all moving together in one big group. No attempt to secure flanks or maintain reserves. Adams shook his head. In human naval doctrine, this formation would be considered suicide. Enemy had no idea about tactical positioning, overlapping fields of fire, or protection of their larger ships. Send the data to Admiral Morrison immediately. Get me a firing solution on their lead elements. Admiral Morrison studied the incoming reports from his scout ships. The Vorthan Empire had finally arrived, but their approach was nothing like what he expected from a successful military force. They're flying in parade formation, he said to Commander Hayes. It's no combat spread, no advanced screening, no tactical flexibility. How did these people conquer 40 worlds? According to the Zephyrians, they rely on overwhelming numbers and superior technology, Hayes replied. They've never faced organized resistance before. Morrison activated the fleet communications. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. Enemy fleet has arrived. They appear to be completely inexperienced in actual combat tactics. We will demonstrate proper military doctrine, launch all fighters, and assume attack formation. The human fleet moved like a living organism. Destroyers spread out to provide overlapping coverage while the carriers launched their fighter squadrons. The larger ships positioned themselves to maximize their firepower, while minimizing their exposure to enemy weapons. Supreme Commander Krexel watched the human fleet deploy with growing confusion. What are those small ships doing? Why are they spreading out instead of staying together? Unknown, sir. Their formation doesn't match any pattern in our databases. Should we continue the standard approach? Krexel studied the tactical display. The humans had twice as many small craft as his fleet, but far fewer capital ships. By Vorthan doctrine, the side with fewer large vessels was supposed to surrender immediately. Send them the standard surrender demand. Tell them resistance is useless against the might of the Vorthan Empire. The message reached Admiral Morrison within minutes. The universal translator converted the alien words, but the arrogance behind them came through clearly. Unknown fleet, you are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender immediately, and your deaths will be quick. Resist, and we will destroy your entire species. You have one of your time units to comply. Morrison looked around his bridge crew. Several officers were trying not to laugh at the crude threat. Open a channel to the Vorthan flagship, Morrison ordered. This is Admiral Morrison of the United Nations Space Fleet. Your terms are rejected. You've entered this system to attack innocent civilians. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The response came back quickly, filled with shock. And anger? You dare refuse the will of the Vorthan Empire? We have destroyed entire worlds. Your tiny fleet cannot stand against us. Then you're welcome to try, Morrison replied calmly. But I suggest you reconsider. This is your only warning. Krexel stared at his communications officer in disbelief. They actually refuse to surrender, even after seeing our numbers. Yes, sir. They claim they will fight us. Impossible. Civilization has ever chosen destruction over submission. There must be some mistake. But even as he spoke, Krexel could see the human ships moving into attack positions. Their formation looked completely wrong by Vorthon standards. But there was something about their movements that made him nervous. Sir, should we proceed with the standard assault? Krexel thought about the 40 worlds he had conquered. Every single victory had followed the same pattern. His fleet would arrive, demand surrender, and the enemy would comply. The few times planets had tried to resist, their defense satellites had been easily destroyed by concentrated fire from his massed fleet. Begin the assault. Target their largest ships first. Show them the price of defying the Empire. The Vorthan fleet moved forward in their traditional wall formation, all ships advancing together toward the human fleet. It was an impressive sight, hundreds of warships moving in perfect unison. Captain Adams watched the enemy approach on his tactical display. They're actually doing it. They're advancing in a straight line with no tactical awareness at all. Lieutenant. Parker looked up from his sensor station. Captain, their ships don't even have their shields angled properly. They're presenting their broadest profiles to our weapons. That's because they've never fought anyone who could shoot back effectively, Adams replied. All fighters, this is Falcon Leader. You are cleared to engage. Show them what real combat looks like. The human fighter squadrons dove toward the Vorthan fleet like hunting hawks. Their attack pattern was something no Vorthan commander had ever seen before. Instead of flying straight at their targets, fighters approached from multiple angles, using the three-dimensional nature of space combat. Krexel watched in growing alarm as small human craft swarmed around his fleet. Why are they flying? In such chaotic patterns? Where is their formation discipline? Sir, they appear to be using some kind of advanced tactical doctrine. Our gunners can't track their movements effectively. Impossible. Combat is simple. You line up your ships and fire at the enemy until they surrender or die. But the human fighters were not following those rules. They attacked from above and below, coordinated their strikes with split-second timing, and used electronic countermeasures that confused Vorthan targeting systems. The first Vorthan ships began taking damage from directions they had never expected. Their weapons were designed to fire forward at enemies who would politely line up in front of them. The idea that someone might attack from multiple angles simultaneously had never occurred to their designers. Supreme Commander, we're taking heavy losses from their small craft. Our formation is breaking apart. Krexel stared at the tactical display in horror. This was not how war was supposed to work. The enemy was supposed to surrender when faced with superior numbers, not fight back with impossible tactics. All ships, maintain formation and continue the advance. Victory is certain. But even as he gave the order, Krexel began to suspect that these humans did not understand how galactic warfare was supposed to function. General Kate Wilson stood in the command center of the human ground base that had been hastily constructed on Zephr Prime. Around her, holographic displays showed the tactical situation as Vorthan landing craft descended toward the planet's surface. Ma'am, enemy dropships are approaching Landing Zone Alpha, reported Major Frank Cooper, her operations officer. Count as approximately 50 craft carrying what appears to be several thousand troops. Wilson studied the enemy formation. Like their space fleet, the Vorthan ground forces were approaching in neat, organized lines with no attempt at tactical dispersion or surprise. What's our defensive posture? She asked. 2 companies of Marines are dug in along the ridgeline overlooking the landing zone. They have overlapping fields of fire and prepared fallback positions. Colonel Peterson is requesting permission to engage once the enemy is fully committed to their landing. Wilson nodded. The Vorthians were about to learn the difference between conquering defenseless civilians and fighting soldiers who knew their business. Sergeant Mike Davis crouched in his fighting position on Hill 247, watching through his scope. As the first Vorthan landing craft touched down in the valley below, his squad was spread out along the ridge in carefully prepared positions that gave them Clear sight lines while keeping them hidden from enemy observation. "Sergeant, what do you see down there?" asked Corporal Jenny White, his squad's demolitions expert. Davis adjusted his scope and studied the alien troops as they exited their landing craft. They're forming up in parade formation right out in the open. No attempt at cover or concealment. They're just standing there like they're waiting for orders. "Are they trying to make themselves easy targets?" "Either that or they have no idea what they're doing," Davis replied. He keyed his radio. "Shh. Bravo 6. This is Bravo 2. Enemy is deployed in the open with no tactical awareness. Requesting permission to engage." The response came back immediately. "Bravo 2. You are cleared to engage at your discretion. Show them what happens when you mess with Marines." Down in the valley, Vorthan Ground Commander Velkar studied his tactical display with satisfaction. His 10,000 troops were arranged in perfect formation, ready to march on the alien city and accept its surrender. "We're detecting defensive positions on the high ground overlooking our position," reported his intelligence officer. Velkar looked up at the ridgeline but saw nothing. "How many enemies?" "Unknown, sir. They appear to be using some kind of camouflage technique. Our sensors can barely detect them. Doesn't matter. They outnumber any possible resistance force. Order the advance." The Vorthon troops began marching up the slope toward the human positions in neat ranks, just as they had on 40 other worlds. Their weapons were held at ceremonial angles, and they moved with the confidence of soldiers who had never faced real opposition. Sergeant Davis watched the enemy advance with professional interest. They're actually marching uphill in formation. It's no scattered advance, no fire and movement, no attempt to flank our positions. "Should we open fire?" asked Private Tom Baker, the squad's youngest member. "Not yet. Let them get closer. Command wants us to capture some prisoners for interrogation." The Vorthines continued their advance, completely unaware that human weapons were tracking their every movement. When they reached the predetermined range, Davis gave the signal. All squads opened fire. The ridge line erupted with the coordinated fire of 2 Marine companies. The humans had positioned themselves to create overlapping fields of fire that caught the Vorthan formation in a deadly crossfire. Within seconds, the orderly alien advance turned into chaos. Commander Velkar watched in shock as his perfectly organized formation disintegrated under accurate fire from positions he couldn't even see. "What's happening? Where's the enemy?" "Sir, they're firing from concealed positions all along the high ground. Our troops are taking heavy casualties. Return fire immediately. Destroy their positions." "Sir, we can't see their positions to target them. They're using advanced camouflage and firing from covered positions." Velkar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The enemy was supposed to meet his troops in open battle, not hide behind rocks and trees like cowards. This wasn't how warfare worked. Order a general advance, and overwhelming numbers will carry the day. But the Vorthan troops had never trained for fighting against an entrenched enemy. Their doctrine was built around intimidating weak opponents into surrender, not assaulting prepared defensive positions. When they tried to advance up the slope, they found themselves caught in carefully planned kill zones. Sergeant Davis watched the enemy attempts to advance with growing amazement. They're trying the same thing over and over. Form up in the open, advance in a straight line, and get cut down by our fire. Then they do it again. "Don't they know about tactical movement?" asked Corporal White. "Apparently not." "Look at this next group. They're actually bunching up instead of spreading out." The battle continued for 3 hours, but it was never really in doubt. The Vorthan forces had superior numbers and equal weapons technology, but they had no concept of tactics, cover, or coordinated movement. Every advance was met by disciplined fire from positions they couldn't locate or effectively target. Finally, Commander Velkar was forced to accept the impossible.
"Out!"
His ground assault had failed completely against a much smaller force.
"Out!"
"Sir, we've lost 60% of our troops and gained no ground. The enemy is requesting our surrender." "Surrender." "We don't surrender. We're the Vorthan Empire." "Sir, they're offering to accept prisoners and treat them according to something they call the rules of war. They say if we don't surrender, they'll demonstrate what they call close assault tactics." Before Velkar could respond, his communications officer reported movement from the human positions. "Sir, small groups of enemy troops are moving down the slope toward our positions. They're using some kind of advanced movement technique." Davis led his squad down the slope using fire and movement tactics. with half his team providing covering fire while the other half advanced from cover to cover. It was basic infantry doctrine that every human soldier learned in training, but to the Vorthons it looked like magic. The humans seemed to appear and disappear at will, always firing from unexpected positions before vanishing again. The alien troops had never seen anything like coordinated small unit tactics. "They're everywhere at once," reported a panicked Vorthan squad leader. "We can't track their movements." Within an hour, the human Marines had infiltrated the Vorthan positions and were demanding surrender at gunpoint. The alien troops, who had expected easy victory, found themselves prisoners of an enemy they barely understood. General Wilson reviewed the battle reports with satisfaction. Her forces had captured over 3,000 Vorthon prisoners, while suffering only 12 wounded and no dead. "Ma'am, the prisoners are asking to speak with our senior commander," reported Major Cooper. "They seem confused about how we achieved victory with inferior numbers. Set up interrogation teams. I want to understand their military doctrine and how they've managed to conquer 40 worlds with such poor tactics." Chief Engineer Paul Martinez was working with captured Vorthon equipment when he made a disturbing discovery. "General, you need to see this. I've been analyzing their weapons and vehicles. What did you find? Their technology is actually superior to ours in many ways. Better power sources, more advanced materials, stronger armor and weapons. They should have won this battle easily." Wilson studied the alien equipment. "Then why didn't they?" "'Cause they've never had to learn how to fight. Every world they conquered surrendered without real resistance. They never developed military tactics because they never needed them." Wilson looked out at the captured Vorthon troops, who were being treated well according to human military law. "So we're dealing with an empire that has advanced technology but primitive military thinking." Exactly. They're like children playing with weapons they don't understand how to use properly. As the sun set over Zephr Prime, Wilson realized that humanity had stumbled into a galaxy where technological superiority had replaced military competence. The Vorthan Empire was powerful but fundamentally weak, because they had never learned the hard lessons that only came from real warfare. The question now was what to do with that knowledge. Admiral Morrison stood in the war room aboard the UN's Liberty, studying a three-dimensional map of Vorthon space. Red dots marked 40 conquered worlds, while blue indicators showed the locations of their major military bases and industrial centers. "The pattern is clear," he said to his senior staff. "The Vorthan Empire is built like a house of cards. They rely on fear and overwhelming force, but they have no real military structure underneath." Commander Rick Hayes pointed to a cluster of red dots near the center of the map. "Our intelligence teams have finished interrogating the prisoners. The Vorthons have never faced organized resistance before. Every world they attacked either surrendered immediately or was destroyed as an example to others." "What about their command structure?" asked General Wilson, who had joined the meeting via secure video link from the surface. "It's completely rigid," Hayes replied. "Orders flow down from the top, but field commanders have no authority to adapt to changing situations. When their standard tactics fail, they just keep repeating them." Morrison nodded grimly. "That explains why they kept sending wave attacks against our defensive positions. They literally don't know any other way to fight." Dr. Amy Chen looked up from her research tablet. "Admiral, I've been studying the captured Vorthan technology with Chief Martinez. Their equipment is definitely more advanced than ours, but it's designed for intimidation rather than actual combat effectiveness." "Explain," Morrison said. "Their weapons are powerful but inaccurate. Their armor is impressive looking but poorly designed for protection. Everything is built to look scary rather than work efficiently. It's like they've been fighting civilians for so long they forgot how to build real military equipment." Chief Engineer Paul Martinez activated a holographic display showing Vorthan ship designs. "Their vessels are the same way, sir. Massive engines, heavy armor, and big guns, but terrible maneuverability and no tactical flexibility. They're designed to overwhelm weak opponents, not fight other warships." Morrison studied the intelligence reports. The Vorthon Empire controlled a vast territory, but their military was fundamentally weak. They had ruled through terror and technological superiority over defenseless worlds. Gentlemen, I believe we have an opportunity here. The Vorthons have never faced a real military threat. If we can demonstrate that they can be defeated, their entire empire might collapse. Commander Nina Jackson, the fleet's intelligence specialist, leaned forward. Sir, what are you proposing? Strategic campaign designed to destroy their ability to project power. We don't need to conquer their territory. We just need to prove they're not invincible. Hayes pulled up detailed scans of Vorthan space. Our scouts have identified 3 key targets: their main shipyard at Zephr Prime, their military command center at Verdal, and their primary industrial world at Nexstar. If we could strike all 3 simultaneously, the psychological impact would be devastating, Morrison finished. An empire built on fear can't survive once people stop being afraid. General Wilson's voice came through the speakers from the surface. Admiral, what about their fleet? Our scouts report they have over 1,000 ships scattered across their territory. That's exactly why this plan will work, Morrison replied. They have their forces spread out to maintain control over 40 worlds. They can't concentrate enough ships in any one location to stop a focused attack. Captain Troy Adams joined the conversation from his destroyer. Sir, are we talking about hit-and-run tactics? Strike fast and withdraw before they can respond. Exactly. We use our superior mobility and tactical awareness to hit targets they can't defend effectively. The goal isn't to hold territory, but to prove that the Vorthon Empire can be beaten. Over the next 2 days, human intelligence teams worked around the clock to plan the operation. Commander Jackson's specialists infiltrated Vorthon communication networks and discovered something remarkable. Admiral, you need to see this, Jackson said, presenting her findings to the senior staff. The Vorthon military has no concept of operational security. Their communications are completely unencrypted, and they share sensitive information over open channels. You mean we can listen to all their military communications? Asked Hayes. Not just listen, sir. We can predict their movements, understand their plans, and even feed them false information. It's like they've never heard of intelligence warfare. Morrison shook his head in amazement. They've been ruling through intimidation for so long, they forgot that someone might actually fight back. The human plan was elegant in its simplicity. 3 strike forces would attack the key Vorthon targets simultaneously, using speed and surprise to overwhelm local defenses. Meanwhile, human intelligence teams would spread confusion through the enemy communication networks. Captain Lisa Brooks would lead the attack on the shipyards at Zephr Prime with 4 destroyers and a carrier group. Captain Adams would strike the command center at Verdal with 3 destroyers and fighter support. A 3rd force under Captain Danny Ross would hit the industrial facilities at Nexstar. Remember, Morrison told his captains during the final briefing, this isn't about conquest. We go in fast, destroy the targets, and get out before they can organize a response. The goal is to prove that human military doctrine can defeat Vorthon technology. The attacks began at exactly the same time, across 3 different star systems. Captain Brooks arrived at Zephr Prime to find the massive shipyards defended by only a dozen obsolete patrol ships. The Vorthons had never imagined anyone would dare attack their industrial centers. All fighters launch, Brooks ordered. Target the construction facilities and dry docks. Ignore the defensive ships unless they get in your way. The human fighters swept through the shipyard complex like a swarm of angry hornets. They used precision strikes to destroy key facilities while avoiding unnecessary damage to civilian areas. Within 2 hours, the largest shipyard in Vorthon space was reduced to burning wreckage. Captain Adams faced heavier resistance at Verdal, but the defenders were using the same failed tactics they had employed at Zephr Prime. Vorthon ships formed up in neat formations and advanced in straight lines, making themselves easy targets for human weapons. Their admiral is actually trying to ram us, Adams reported to Morrison. He's charging straight at our formation with his entire fleet. Classic Vorthon tactics, Morrison replied. Show him what happens when intimidation meets military science. Battle at Verdal lasted for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Vorthons fought with courage but no skill, throwing their ships away in futile charges against superior tactics and training. Captain Ross had the easiest assignment at Nextar. The industrial world was defended by automated systems designed to scare away pirates, not fight a real military force. His destroyers systematically destroyed the factories and mining facilities that supplied the Vorthon war machine. When the smoke cleared, 3 key Vorthon installations had been destroyed, with minimal human casualties, but the real victory came from the psychological impact across the Empire. Commander Jackson monitored Vorthon communications as news of the defeat spread. Admiral, their entire command structure is in chaos. Local commanders are requesting reinforcements, but there's no central coordination of the response. What about their civilian populations? Morrison asked. The conquered worlds are beginning to rebel, realizing that the Vorthon Empire isn't as powerful as it claimed to be. Several planets have already declared independence. Morrison studied the strategic map as red dots began turning neutral across Vorthon space. The empire that had taken 50 years to build was beginning to collapse after just 1 week of real warfare. "Sir," said Hayes, "we're receiving surrender offers from 12 different Vorthon fleet commanders. They want to negotiate before we attack their home systems." Morrison smiled grimly. The Vorthon Empire had learned the hard lesson that human military history had taught over and over again. Technology and numbers meant nothing without the knowledge and skill to use them effectively. "Open a channel to the Vorthon High Command," Morrison ordered. "It's time to discuss terms." Emperor Zareth sat alone in his throne room on the Vorthon homeworld, staring at reports of defeat that seemed impossible to believe. In 1 week, the empire he had spent his entire life building was crumbling around him, Your Majesty said. His chief advisor, General Crexnell, "We have lost contact with 17 outer systems. The humans have destroyed our 3 most important military installations, and rebellion is spreading across our territory." Zareth looked at the holographic map that showed his empire shrinking by the hour. Red zones marked worlds that had declared independence, while yellow areas indicated systems where Vorthon control was under threat. How is this possible? "We have ruled the galaxy for 50 years. Our technology is superior. Our fleets outnumber these humans 100 to 1. Your Majesty, the humans fight differently than anyone we have ever encountered. They use tactics and strategies that our commanders cannot counter. They strike from unexpected directions, coordinate multiple attacks simultaneously, and seem to predict our every move." Zareth stood up from his throne, his hands shaking with rage and fear. "Are you telling me that one small fleet of primitives has defeated the mighty Vorthon Empire? Your Majesty, perhaps it is time to consider negotiation. Humans have sent terms for our surrender." The word surrender hit Zareth like a physical blow. No Vorthon Emperor had ever surrendered to anyone. The Empire existed because it was stronger than everyone else. If they surrendered now, it would mean admitting that everything they believed about their superiority was wrong. "What are their terms?" he asked quietly. General Crexnell activated a communication device, and Admiral Morrison's voice filled the throne room. "Emperor Zareth, this is Admiral Morrison of the United Nations Space Fleet. Your empire is finished. Your military has been defeated, your key installations destroyed, and your subject worlds are declaring independence. I am offering you one chance to end this peacefully. You dare dictate terms to the Vorthon Empire?" Zareth snarled. "I'm offering you the chance to save the lives of your people," Morrison replied calmly. "Your choice is simple. Surrender unconditionally and accept the dissolution of your empire, or watch as every Vorthon fleet is systematically destroyed by forces they cannot defeat." Zareth looked at his remaining advisors. All of them wore expressions of defeat and fear. They had seen the reports from the front lines, watched their most powerful fleets broken by human tactics they could not understand. "If we surrender, what happens to our people?" "The Vorthon homeworld will be placed under protective custody until a civilian government can be established. Your military will be disbanded, and war criminals will face trial. But your people will be allowed to live in peace. And if we refuse, then we will demonstrate why Earth is called a death world, and you will understand what happens when a species that evolved through constant warfare decides to end a threat permanently. The silence stretched for long minutes. Finally, Zaret's shoulders sagged in defeat. I surrender. The Vorthan Empire formally surrenders to the human fleet. 3 months later, Admiral Morrison stood on the observation deck of the UNS Liberty, watching as the last Vorthan warship was escorted to a scrapping facility. The once mighty empire had collapsed completely, its former territory now divided among newly independent worlds and the growing Terran Protectorate. "Admiral," said Captain Brooks, joining him at the viewport, "we've received word from Earth. The dimensional rift has stabilized, but crossing back would require most of our fuel reserves." Morrison nodded. They had faced this decision weeks ago when Dr. Chen confirmed that the magical rift was beginning to close. It could return to Earth, but it would mean abandoning the peaceful alien civilizations to whatever new threats might emerge. "What's the crew's position on staying?" "Unanimous vote to remain, sir. The men and women of this fleet believe we have a responsibility to protect these worlds. Earth is safe, but this galaxy needs us." Morrison smiled, thinking about the irony of their situation. They had been pulled into this galaxy by aliens who wanted heroes from legend. Instead, they had become something more practical, but perhaps more valuable teachers and protectors for species that had forgotten how to defend themselves. "Sir," said Commander Hayes, approaching with a data pad, "I have the final report on the new Academy program." Morrison took the pad and reviewed the information. Colonel Turner's Academy of Strategic Thinking had become the most important institution in the former Vorthan space. Representatives from dozens of worlds were learning basic concepts like military planning, defensive tactics, and threat assessment. "How are the students adapting to human military doctrine?" Arson asked. "Better than expected, sir. Zephrians are particularly good at logistics and coordination. The Ketharin have natural talent for engineering and fortification. Even some of the former Vorthan officers are proving to be capable students once they unlearn their old habits." "Join the group, carrying her own reports?" "Admiral, I've completed my analysis of why the summoning ritual worked. The magical energy was drawn to Earth because our planet produces a specific type of psychic resonance. Explain that in terms a soldier can understand," Morrison said with a smile. "Every species in this galaxy evolved on peaceful worlds where cooperation and harmony were the keys to survival. Earth was different. For millions of years, everything on our planet had to fight to survive. That constant struggle created a mental pattern that the aliens, magic recognized as the essence of what they call heroism." Morrison looked out at the stars, thinking about the responsibility that had been placed on humanity's shoulders. "We're no longer just refugees from another galaxy. It become the guardians of countless peaceful worlds." Captain Joy Adams appeared on the communication screen from his new assignment as head of fleet security. "Admiral, we're receiving requests for protection agreements from 12 more systems. Word is spreading that human military advisors can teach defensive tactics to any species willing to learn. What's our response capacity?" "We can establish training centers on 6 additional worlds this year. Colonel Turner is requesting more instructors, and General Wilson wants to expand the Marine training program." Morrison made his decision. "Approved. Send word to Earth through the next supply convoy. Tell them the United Nations Space Fleet has found a new mission protecting the innocent and teaching the peaceful how to defend themselves." As the months passed, the Terran Protectorate grew from 7 worlds to 20, then 50. Each new member brought their own talents and knowledge, creating a true alliance rather than an empire. Captain Lisa Brooks, now serving as Earth's first galactic ambassador, established diplomatic relations with species across the galaxy. The reputation of human military effectiveness opened doors that had been closed to outsiders for centuries. Dr. Chen founded the Institute for Interspecies Understanding, where humans and aliens work together to bridge the gap between Deathworld survivors and Garden World inhabitants. Her research helped develop training programs that taught peaceful species to think strategically without losing their essential nature. 1 year after the fall of the Vorthan Empire, Morrison stood in the same observation lounge watching a very different scene. Human and alien children played together in the station's recreation areas. While their parents worked side by side in laboratories, workshops, and command centers, Admiral said Hayes, now promoted to captain of his own ship. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the Zephyrians had successfully summoned the heroes they expected? Morrison watched a group of young aliens learning basic self-defense from a human instructor, their movements careful but determined. I think they got exactly what they needed, Rick. Not heroes from legend, but teachers who could help them become heroes themselves. The galaxy was changing. Peaceful worlds were learning to stand up for themselves, while aggressive empires found that conquest was no longer easy when their targets knew how to fight back. Humanity had brought more than military knowledge to the stars. They had brought the hard-won wisdom that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to be prepared for war. And in the end, perhaps that was the greatest heroism of all.